Whoa, close up. So, hi, 735 friends. This is an additional test review. I am going to go through the all of the different items on your test review HOA 735. This document. So, if you'd like to follow along, you may. I just wanted to say a few things about some of these bullet points, and again, all in the spirit of helping you study maybe a little bit better, and or if you have any questions, hopefully some of those will be answered. So it starts off with intro and science, and of course that's where we start. The first few questions here, these are things straight out of your textbook, straight out of the lecture. Most of this is. But we need you to understand what business research is, and that in essence we're trying to reduce uncertainty. Establishing certainty, as Sagan pointed out, probably really difficult to do, certainly with the human sciences. But in reducing uncertainty, we can achieve a lot, and a lot of our efforts methodologically are designed to do that. So traditional knowledge, authority knowledge, those are all outlined on your lecture notes. And scientists cringe when we think something's unknowable. We don't believe in that if we're scientists. And at the very least, they believe in going after it and having that spirit of science. So try to embrace that as you're writing your answers. If I see a thoughtful, engaged mind that is thinking in the way that Sagan thought and being very critical, very smart, very thoughtful, I like that. Auguste Comte and others thought that applying the scientific method to humans could be really, really powerful because after all, we had done it with corn and agriculture. And a lot of different human disciplines from psychology to sociology to economics can be summarized in one word. Remember that was on your slide. Economics is the market, sociology is the group, psychology is the individual, and so forth. And each of those are important. Anthropology, super important because it looks at culture. We've talked about that at length. Know these stories, the Chevy Nova story, the MGM Grand Lion story, my mistake in South Korea, and the Singapore architecture mistake as well. Moneyball, a great illustration of how a rigorous scientific approach improved a team and made a team, and you can apply this to business and in life, better by virtue of being more rigorous and insisting on measurement and insisting on not throwing up your hands and saying, well, we can't possibly know things, and actually trying to know things. So be able to use that as an illustration of using the scientific method, and the steps of the scientific method are in both your text and in your lecture notes. And Sagan argues that the best we have, and he says, look, if there was another better way, I'd use that. But science, when compared to the predictive power of like religious gurus that look into crystals and predict the future, nothing is as good as science at predicting, at developing models that are reliable and precise, and that you can count on. Science you can count on, is what Sagan's saying. There are two pillars that he is interested in with science. There's wonder and skepticism. And remember, I talked about how wonder is kind of like a little kid and skepticism sort of like a skeptical, older, cynical adult. Maybe I'm one of those people. But finding that balance between wondering about what's out there and then being really skeptical, really critical about it, that's crucial to science. Basic versus applied research. So basic research, of course, is just knowledge for knowledge's sake, and applied research is applied to a direct problem. But of course, sometimes stuff comes up in basic research that really helps us solve a problem. So it's not as easy a separation as you might think. The informed consent document, I will send this to you in an email. Review that. There will not be a question on this on the exam. However, you've been certified as ethical researchers, and if you go through that informed consent document, it outlines everything you need to outline if you're going to be doing this kind of research. I've just noticed that my hair is really spiky today. I'm going to try to tamp it down a bit. Look a little more professorial here today. Okay, enough on that. So don't worry too much about ethics for this test, but know ethics more generally as a researcher, and certainly you do as you've been certified. Know what theory is. Again, this is straight off your notes. And the goals of theory: concept, conceptualization, operationalization into variables. Those are all outlined in your notes. Remember, a dimension is a subtype, and then an indicator is something you choose to use as a measurement of that subtype or facet of something big. So I think we turned love into dimensions, different kinds of love, and then we used each of those to laser focus on an actual question item. Sampling. We always sample. We're always sampling. You're just not doing it particularly well. Another theme of the 735 course. If that works its way into an essay answer, spot on. Know what samples are to statistics, or statistics are to samples. Samples have statistics. Populations have parameters. and be able to pick out each of these in a research story. We want you to be able to also be good at representativeness and generalizability. In general, you can generalize to the degree you've achieved representativeness. What's representativeness? Well, it means that your population, your sample reproduces all of the variations that are present in the bigger population. So representativeness means it looks like the bigger pie, right? And if you've achieved that in general, you can claim this is likely to be generalizable to the broader population. That's the interrelationship there. Probability samples incorporate randomness. Non-probability samples do not. Random selection is something we define in the notes. And know each of those subtypes. You can look these up, obviously, through the various textbooks online, but know each of these subtypes. Be able to pick them out of an example, for example. All the attributes, measurement, art and science of questionnaire, that's the Brett lecture. Each of these, once more, are straight off of your notes. Make sure you can understand the difference between a nominal, which is a name level question. What state are you from? What country are you from? Ordinal, how much do you like bananas? 5, a lot, 1, not very much. The 1 and the 5 aren't real numbers there, but clearly a lot is more than not very much. So there's an order there. How old are you is interval, right? Each year is one equal interval. Think about that as you think about interval level variables. Each of these are important as you're developing measurements. Lots of do's and don'ts in there, open-ended versus closed-ended. I'm sure you're pretty good on that. And then as we move into surveys, as always, with all of these tests and tools, make sure that you can outline, here are the good things, here are the bad things, strengths and weaknesses of all the different subtypes. Self-administered subtypes, and there are a lot of different kinds of those. Face-to-face, where you're actually confronted by a person, and telephone surveys, which you do, of course, over the telephone. Typically, though, not like this, typically with a computer-assisted telephone interview. Be able to invoke a few strengths and weaknesses, 1 or 2 each. You should be good. You don't need to memorize those entire lists, but I provide it for your help and assistance. We put in those lecture notes a ton of pluses and minuses. Getting into experiments, know that this is where you do stuff and then you measure the outcomes of that doing stuff. And know that the classic experiment structure, the one that I use to illustrate the drug test and is in your lecture notes, know that one cold. And then everything can kind of build off of that foundation, the classical experimental foundation. Make sure you can thoroughly assess the strengths and weaknesses of these approaches. As always, the experiment, as with any other tool. Know that correlation is not causation. Know that, in fact, there are some things we need to do to establish a cause, and know what those are. Again, all in your notes. Be able to use some supercrunchers examples of like A/B testing. This is a form of experimental design, and in fact, when we look at how different kinds of real-world examples play out, certainly that book provides you with a ton of them. Internal validity, that's basically looking inward at the experiment to find any issues. Those are things like the history effect, right? Big slide on that. And then external validity is basically, can we take it outside? Is it valid externally? Is it generalizable? Know that when you think about external validity. We gave an illustration of test marketing. That's basically where your control group and your experimental group are cities or markets, and be able to apply, for example, a marketing campaign to one or the other. That would then be the experimental group. So no experimental control group, independent and dependent variable, and of course, all the other things that we list here. Know that there might be meddling third variables, and watch out for those. Watch out for your elbows. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else with experiments. I don't think so. As we moved into the qualitative critique and the qualitative turn, know that qualitative research came out of a critique of quantitative methods. We spent a lot of time last lecture talking about that critique. And understand that a lot of folks believe that we're not easily quantifiable. You can't turn us into numbers as easily as we might like. And qualitative researchers say that's okay. Let's embrace the messiness. Let's embrace the flexibility. Let's be okay with this. Observation, once more, you're doing that and liking what we're seeing from you're doing that. Here's a useful thing to be able to do. Be able to use a Why We Buy illustration to illustrate your points. If you've read Supercrunchers and Why We Buy and you've got good examples to pepper your answers with, we'll love that. We'll be in really good shape there. So with that, I'm coming up against the 10-minute limit to my YouTube video, but please call me via cell phone if you like and you want to talk more. Thanks so much and hope that helped.